Uh, rising sea levels, the ice caps melting, human extinction, and it's all your fault. Do you feel guilty? Do you feel afraid? Well, don't be, because it's not true. My goal is not to change your mind. My goal is to encourage you to do your own research and not take these guys' words for it. I want to encourage all of you to think about what I'm going to say today, about how a very few people are using scare tactics to benefit themselves at the cost of many. Today I will discuss the history of man-made climate change, the actual cause of climate change, and why the myth persists. Climate change has an interesting history. In the 1970s, there was a global cooling scare. On January 26, 1970, the Argus newspaper from Owasso, Michigan, reported that we were on the brink of a man-made ice age. Pollution was blocking out the sun's rays. And this started because in 1940, the Earth started to cool, and it had continued through 1970, so scientists thought that this was going to be a long-term trend. They said that by 1984, the Earth would be 20 degrees cooler than it was today. And this was backed up, this was reported by several news organizations that, are big news organizations. You could say there was a consensus at the time. And this ice age alarmism lasted until about 1977, when the Earth started to warm again. And then it went away. Now, there was not a lot of talk between 77 and about the mid-80s about the climate. However, something happened in 1984 that would change all that. And that was the United Kingdom's miners' strike, coal miners' strike. This was a very large strike, as strikes go. And it was putting a lot of strain on the United Kingdom government. And the Prime Minister at the time was Margaret Thatcher. She declared the strike illegal. She called the organizer of the strike an enemy of the state, the enemy within. And she was very, very against this strike, very, very against coal. The strike ended in 1985, but she continued to battle their influence until she left office in 1990. Now, because of her hatred for the coal unions, she started to look at alternative power sources for the United Kingdom, mainly nuclear power and natural gas. She was a strong supporter of the IPCC, and she directed a lot of their efforts in the late 80s and early 90s. All right? So the point I'm trying to make is this is all politics. This has nothing to do with the Earth. She hated the coal miners' union. So that's what started the IPCC, and back then it was Margaret Thatcher. Now, you may have heard that there's a 97% consensus among scientists that global warming is man-made. That is a fabrication. That is absolutely not real. It was invented by non-scientist John Cook and has zero basis in fact. Another thing about the history of global warming are the many conspiracies that have popped up around it, such as the 2009 ClimateGate, 2011 ClimateGate 2, the tampering of NASA data in 2014, and the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration's data tampering in 2015. And there's a lot more, but unfortunately I don't have time. There's a lot of scandals revolving around this. So what is the truth? Is the climate changing at all? First, we're going to talk about carbon dioxide, the big evil. Carbon dioxide is not a major greenhouse gas. This graph was taken from a joint study by the University of Ohio, University of New Mexico, the Los Alamos National Laboratory, the Bird Polar Research Center, and the Dalhousie University in Nova Scotia, Canada. Dr. Piers Corbin, a British astrophysicist and climate researcher, is quoted as saying, "None of the major climate changes in the last 1,000 years can be explained by carbon dioxide. Temperature leads carbon dioxide by about 800 years. That's according to Professor Ian Clark, a climate scientist from the University of Ottawa. And what he is talking about is as the Earth warms, carbon dioxide goes up, not the other way around. Because as the Earth warms, the oceans release carbon dioxide, and as the Earth cools, it traps carbon dioxide, which is perfectly normal and natural. The Earth's climate is always changing. Warming began about 200 years ago at the end of the Little Ice Age. It was so cold that the Thames River in London would actually freeze over, which is unheard of nowadays. And before the Little Ice Age was the medieval warm period. Now that was 1.5 degrees Celsius warmer than it is today. And there were no cars, there were no factories at that time. And that's according to a Swedish study in 2013. There were vineyards in northern England, and it was even warmer before that in the Roman warm period. So I would just want to show you that it's completely natural, the Earth warms and cools. And what warms the Earth? Well, the sun does. This graph is taken from the Danish Meteorological Institute, showing that the solar activity changes the Earth's warming, not carbon dioxide. And just real quick, Arctic sea ice is completely normal this time of year, also from the DMR. All right, so why does this myth persist? Well, you can probably guess that has a lot to do with money, as does almost everything. Climate change is big business. Dr. Roy Spencer of NASA said that climate scientists need there to be a problem in order to get funding. This graph, by the way, is from the Science and Public Policy Institute. Professor John Christie, he's a member of the IPCC and a climate scientist, he said, "We have a vested interest in creating panic because then money will flow into climate science." Forbes reported that under President Bush, $170 million was dedicated to, this is the first President Bush, before you get it more. $170 million was put aside for climate science. Today that amount is over $2 billion per year. All right? What global warming alarmism also does is it hinders development in developing countries, such as Africa, certain parts of Asia. And this benefits Europe and the United States because they have less competition to deal with. Kenyan economist James Shikwati says environmentalism is killing the African dream of development. And Patrick Moore, co-founder of Greenpeace, said that the environmental movement has evolved into the strongest force there is for preventing development in developing countries. Because they need electricity, cheap electricity, in order to compete with Europe and the United States. And lastly, climate change celebrities are making a fortune, such as Al Gore. ABC reported Al Gore was worth about $1 million when he lost the presidency in 2001. And 6 years later, after several climate change tours and a climate change movie, he was worth $100 million. All right? So let me sum it up. Man-made climate change is political, not scientific. The sun warms the earth, not carbon dioxide. And money is driving it all. So when you hear that climate change is your fault, don't believe it. I'm not asking that you believe everything I say. I'm sorry, not just me, but the scientists as well. I'm asking that you do your own research and think for yourself, because you might find there's another point of view. Thank you.